export sales, and once established, would not be dependent on Earth orbit transportation costs to generate continuing revenues. The commercial satellite communication industry satisfies all those conditions except the first. Its potential market size of several $1 billion per year is not large enough to make a substantial impact on U.S. gross national product. One highly speculative space enterprise would, if technically and economically feasible, satisfy all of the ideal conditions, including large market size. This enterprise would provide electric energy for Earth from satellites intercepting solar energy in geostationary orbit. The total market for electricity at the price is now common for coal and nuclear power plants is on the order of $400 billion per year worldwide. Capturing such a market would make a substantial impact on the United States gross national product and balance of payments. Now, perhaps the more important aspect of the solar power satellite is that it's not polluted. We think about all the pollution, carbon dioxide, with its impact on increasing the Earth's temperature. We think about those things, but realize that the solar power satellite may have another mission besides just generating electrical power. I'd like to demonstrate this to you. I have a model that right over here, and what I'd like to point out here is that the first place, this is rated to scale. Actually, proportionally, the solar power satellite, how is out at that distance. The solar cells are the green portion of it, and they always point at the sun. You can consider yourself as the audience as being the sun, and also the camera will be in the position of being the sun. You'll notice at that radius, geosynchronous radius, the satellite rotates at the same speed as the Earth, so we can put in a fixed microwave beam length. Now, the thing I want to call your attention to is that you'll notice, now this is the summertime, and you'll notice that this is visible 24 hours a day. And in fact, in wintertime, it's also visible if it's below the Earth. This is because of the tilt of 23 degrees that the Earth has, and it's when it goes around its ecliptic.
This is, to me, extraordinarily amusing that Bill made a point of highlighting this feature of geostationary Earth orbit, because in Peter Glaser's original article, which was published in Science with peer review, he messed that up. So Peter wrote about how every orbit, the satellite in geostationary Earth orbit, would pass through the Earth's shadow. And this is, of course, in the 1960s, the mid-1960s, when nobody knew a lot about space. It was not as internalized as it is now. And so if you take a look at that article, which is still available online, it's quite interesting that Peter talks about how these geostationary Earth orbit satellites, the SPS, will go through the Earth's shadow every orbit. And to me, at least, it's interesting that this model, which Bill made quite recently after his introduction to the concept, highlights the fact that that's not the case.
There are only a few times of the year in which we do experience an eclipse of the satellite by the Earth, and I can rotate this around and show you that too, I think. These panels, of course, always do face. I think in most of you will see that when this gets around to the side, that it will be eclipsed by the Earth. But that eclipse occurs about midnight for periods of no longer than 1 hour, and for about 20 or 25 days during the vernal and autumnal equinoxes. Now, I have this here, I can also show you that if you're close to the Earth, that's what happens, and you can't possibly have a fixed microwave beam. Nevertheless, we'll be talking about transmitting power between the Earth and those same satellites presently. Now, if we just taking a look at just a little bit of
So obviously we're running behind time, and I apologize for that. I just wanted to have you actually see to the two giants, the people who created the field of space solar power, Bill Brown and Peter Glaser. I almost said Dick Dickinson, but it's fair enough. He's back there. I don't want to talk about Dick. Highlight that I will be showing more of these old home movies at the gala dinner on Sunday as a part of the commemoration of 50 years of space solar power. So with that, I will stop, and thank you for your kind attention.
Again, there's a sign-in sheet each day, and if you want to be involved in the IAA study group, put a star by your name if you want to do that while there's a break here. We'd appreciate it.
And I will apologize. I am going to have to leave on time, even though I ran us late, because I've got to go to the luncheon. I've got an obligation.
Can I have a confession, John?
Yes.
During the presentation, when the noise from the door was so bad, I went back and shut it. And this guy opens it up and says, "No, don't you want a table up there?" I said, "Not right now."
So it's your fault.
That's
If
my
we don't
fault.
have our panel.
That's right. The panel will go table this.
I think we can stand, as long as there's no scarves and no hats. And this morning in the opening ceremony, there was a felicitation from a gentleman who has the NSS chapter at one of the towns in India, and he did a felicitation, involves a shawl, a ceremonial shawl, and read a quotation from Sanskrit, and a very nice hat, and a lei of flowers. I promise the photos will
Is
be
Guy still
destroyed.
around? And Hal, if you'd like to, join us. Oh, sure. Guy? Talk to you down here.
Sound quality is good.
Poor guy will set up the table.
Right in the middle of the session. Would you mind not standing on the court?
Right.
From under you.
Okay, we'll like to get this underway. Basically, the intention here is to continue the remembrances a bit, and sort of spin it forward for how we go through and leverage the experiences of the past as to how we engage for creating the future that we'd like to see in those regards. So we have. I guess from my perspective, it's interesting listening to the different talks. I had found myself in a situation in the early 70s of being confronted with the limits to growth, which basically the thesis was we were already dead, we just didn't know it yet. Several years past that, the Club of Rome offered us the notion that maybe if we went to an inordinate amount of trouble, we might be able to sell our soul as a species to achieve some form of steady, unsteady state. Maybe buy us 100 years, and then we're dead. And then there's this heretic physicist at Princeton University, Dr. Gerard K. O'Neill, who said, well, maybe the Earth isn't necessarily a closed system, and that the highest and best expression of a successful technological society isn't a paved planet. It's a park in making use of the energy and material resources and potential habitable area in space. And the key element of that was the space solar power notions, and that was a piece, having read too much Buckminster Fuller, in my day, and anybody that offers up a Kuhn quote, clearly, has some educational chops. So it's all part of a reoccurring theme. I think that there's some things going forward, and I'd like you folks to try and offer your thoughts as to how we pay it forward and make the most use of these opportunities. I'd like to.
Maybe being the oldest of us sitting here, I don't know. I'm not asking anyone to get their driver's license out. To have seen this age of technology, the explosion of it, and recognize that we're now moving toward a presence in space. Of course, I was one of those youngsters when I was 7 or 8 or 10 years old, used to read Bugs Rogers magazines. Do I remember that? Yeah, okay. But to me, that was a challenge. I said, that looks like that can do that. Those guys flying around like that, making all those little funny noises. But what caught my attention is that we had to get to the moon to make the first step. I think that's what Neil Armstrong said, first step. And so to participate in that really made me a special fellow to myself, that I had actually became a part of that story. And I think I've spent my life trying to find out or visualize, maybe a better word, where do we go from here? And of course, I've spoken to any number of faces I see in the audience right now over the years about some of the possible energy sources, and I'm extremely excited about dark energy. I suppose if I would have asked us to raise our hands, we all probably say yeah, but that's not rocket science. But we've got to find the breakthrough to learn about this most magnificent force. To me, that's my interest. I pray about it and ask for wisdom about it. I try to bring it to the attention of young people who, when you mention that, they think you're talking about chocolate drinks or something like that. But we want them to understand that potential for that source of energy to become something we can work with in the future. And so I'm an advocate along those particular lines. Lastly, I'm always struggling as a human being who was made in my particular configuration, that when we think of space and the frontiers of the universe that we're trying to attain and reach, it's going to take all of us together to do that. Each of us in our individual, collective way has a part to play in that. So I just hope as we use words like for all of humanity, we really mean that, because that has not been our case back here on the surface. And I think we need what I like to call a metamorphosis, such that we can see a future where we really have that involvement and total commitment of all the humanity of the earth. Thank you.
In the same line of thought, I would like to mention someone we didn't talk much about. It's Dr. Abdul Kalam. We had a brilliant Indian ceremony this morning, and Abdul Kalam is a kind of unusual politician, visionary. He put India in orbit, and after that he was called Missile Man because he designed some army and missile force for India, and eventually he was asked to become the president of India, 1 million to 200 million people at the time, and he was a fervent supporter of SPS. He received, I think it was at one of these conferences, the Von Braun Prize a few years ago. When was that, 5 years ago or so? Shortly before he died. a brilliant presentation about SPS, and he concluded today we have the means to make planet Earth a place that will be livable for us, for all, that will be peaceful, and that will be profitable. And the end was, what are we waiting for?
Okay, I'd like to offer a further suggestion on furthering satellite power systems. And one of the things we've really got to do is to monetize it. We've really got to convince some people, investors and so forth, workers who need jobs, people who build spaceships and rockets, that there is a way to make money off of this. And I'm going to offer some advice here regarding pushing for more wireless power demonstrations and so forth. One of the things that you can do with wireless power transmission is indeed move power from one place to another. And one way of doing that is bouncing it off of reflectors. Okay, now, first one that I heard about was Tom Rogers, who wanted to put large reflectors in orbit and beam power from the oil regions in the Middle East up to the European Union with these large reflectors in space. Well, Peter Glaser at A.D. Little got with the Boeing people and did a very detailed study on reflecting microwave power off of geosynchronous reflectors from the Itapu Dam, which is at the southern end of Brazil, up to Martha's Vineyard on the floating rectenna. We put a floating rectenna in Martha's Vineyard to receive power from this hydropower dam, which is producing many gigawatts in Brazil. Then the next instance of that was Ivan Becky, your old boss. He and Bondurant or something, this guy wanted to send millimeter wave power from hydro Canada to rectennas and floating on lakes in Japan. And the idea of putting the rectenna on the lake in Japan was to keep the high energy receiving into the system out of the public. The next one after that was I got a call from Exxon, a guy in Houston who works for their transmission system and just built the pipeline that goes from the North Shore, North Slope, down to where they put the oil in the tankers. And this was before the tanker had its big problem there. The Valdez, right. And he wanted to know, could you send power from the North Slope to, he wanted to send it to Houston, of all places. Okay. Then when John sent me to Geneva to present papers on satellite power to the ITU and so forth, and one of the delegates there from Syria was very interested in sending power to the European Union from Syria. He says, we're a poor country, but we've got lots of area, and we've got lots of sunshine, and we could take that sunshine, convert it to microwaves, and beam it to the European Union. And I says, yes, that really could be done. So there's some interest in people who really want to make money transmitting power from one side to the other, and that probably ought to be pursued to some degree. But you don't have to start out at GEO to do that. All of these others were GEO. Okay, well, a friend of mine, John's at JPL, came up with the idea that Norway has a lot of hydropower available in the summer. And they would like to export it to Germany, which has lots of air conditioners running in the summer. And one thing that could be done is to put up stationary balloons at some altitude with their station keeping provided by beam power, have the reflectors inside the airships, and like a periscope, beam power up from Norway across the sea and bring it down in Germany. Now, they're putting in very expensive high voltage submarine cables to do some of that now. But there's still possibilities for islands, perhaps in French territory, and send power to
So, to Gary's question, sort of what we've talked a lot in the last couple of hours about the past and looking to the future. I think we are on an inevitable trajectory at this moment, which unfortunately can, as has happened so many times in the past, change quickly. But at this moment, I think some of the things we talked about yesterday, in particular, with regard to the real prospect for very low-cost launch, and what it means for the development of space and for the emergence of a high level of market demand in space for affordable and abundant electrical power. To some extent, we have, I'm going to make one more historical reference. After the fall of Rome, there was a period of time when the Roman civilization continued in Constantinople, at the Bosphorus Straits, what is now Istanbul. Europe fell into the Dark Ages, and we have, and then it was then 1,000 years of interregnum before the Renaissance and before Europe climbed back out of the Dark Ages. We, who are advocates for space development to some extent, have been in a similar situation since 1986, and the Challenger disaster made it clear that the space shuttle was not going to achieve 52 flights a year and launch costs of a few $100s a kilogram, and all of the visions that have been talked about by O'Neill and by others of doing ambitious things in space and utilizing space for the benefit of humanity became fanciful. There was a point in time some years later when NASA, for example, declared that lowering the cost of launch was not one of the goals of its space transportation technology program, because it wasn't possible. Space launch is too hard, it's always going to be expensive. And now through, as I mentioned yesterday, I described them using the metaphor of the robber barons of the 19th century. I'm sorry, I promised, but the previous one was my last historical reference. We have the opportunity to see, not in our lifetime, but in a few years, really low-cost launch. That's going to open up markets in space that will be enabled by large amounts of energy, affordable energy, and widely available. And so I think that the path forward for space solar power for Earth may in fact run through the north and south poles of the moon.
We are about to run into the lunch endeavors, but I think that there's a few key things here. One, we're into an era where if we can succeed in a suspension of disbelief, if we can draw out the specifics of how you can actually make money on the deals, if you can articulate a vision that actually makes international cooperation work, if you find the way that this enables us to architect a better future for us all. It's not a panacea by any means, but it is something that can make a real contribution to a future that we'd like to see come to pass. We'll have more details in the rest of the symposia. I'd like to thank you all very much for taking the time to participate, and please join us again at 2 o'clock. Joe?
Don't forget the sign-in sheet.
Yes.
We do it each day, and if you want to
I gave the
participate
assignment to the right man.
in the IAA study group and work team, come over and put a star by your name. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the panelists for participating.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Gary. That program we could drive me drive, and I'll do it this afternoon. You still want me on it? You know what happens sometimes they don't always get it right there.
I was intrigued by your comment.
Yeah, they must have. All right, I'll be here in the afternoon. I'll let you know. Oh, okay.
I would like to get a copy of your slides. Oh no, there's one up here. There's an interface for this, for Lightning.
Right here.
So you can use the Lightning
Yes.
and go directly to the drive for the projector. So.
In this type.
Yeah, no
this
problem.
Computer,
Yes.
Directly connected.
Just to here.
Oh no. The
other side.
the other side.
Okay. And then you are in business.
This.
Oh, you have that one also? Oh,
Yes,
fine,
yes.
fine. Oh, don't lose your interface.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah.
He's just testing. I gotta go to the luncheon.
all right,
Okay, not yet.
all right.
So, Koji, I was going to put some of your charts on the. Is this for the one after lunch or for?
Yeah. After lunch.
Okay. Do you mind if we copy it onto this computer just so that?
But I'd like to use my computer for my presentation.
Okay. Well, so we'll have to switch it out then, I guess. So let me. I have the other ones that are on this USB that I was going to put. So the. So do you want to test it? I'm sorry. So let's see.
Okay. I already checked.
Oh, okay. Cool. Okay.
Nice to see you. I remember was like somebody decided to do an experiment in tattoo removal, and we wanted someone in the future to have dark skin. And I remember this big blister we made up. That's my home. Some guys wanted to use it as laser. So they selected a whole bunch of nice quotes. We're all running. Just came back from and that was so crazy because all five of them stayed with us. 3 kids and 2 adults. Yeah, adult partners. Trying to make a phone 9:30 to 1, and it's usually 3 to 4 before they leave.
And the parents come along. And that's what makes it exciting. So the parents are all excited. That's what they're learning something. It's amazing. They got an appointment to make their project to the Congress when they get back.
So what you're saying is to.
Yeah.
I think this is good.
But usually we are there.
What I'm saying is we talk about it after this. Okay, that is fine. Find a venue down in the park, whatever, and.
I mentioned that many
So that's why we can see these kids, you know. And then we have one student who just got her degree in geology. And we brought her to
You may hear
they put together
this is how this works. It's actually normal. Say something. Only a few people
every
trend. It's not the trend they're talking about, dark matter. I don't know if it is either. I'm making just a I just noticed I said it, I saw your eyes.
it's close enough.
Maybe, we don't know.
That's all you're interested in. I can get her to a telephone, okay? And so we arranged our science teacher to let her stay there. They were doing the call. And we talked to her like about and she came.
Then his wife said,
she
"You're
had
40."
science
So he did. And he said 90% of all the green energy projects across America is funded. Wow. But he just died in October, so now it's going, now our fund is.
Oh, I'd like to introduce you to Paul Jaffe.
Hey, everyone.
We got a lot of stories like that.
Cool. Got a lot in there.
That's the plan, you know, he's here to make sure that.
You're a legend.
You're right.
So
yes, I'm not delving into the whole.
So you work with McDonald's like this over
yeah, because we're going now, because I gotta get a phone. Get them some lunch. But yeah, let them show them, they're rocket engineer, they know.
Oh, okay.
Got the draw this. James, first of all, I'd like to introduce you to.
So now you're.
Right in your ballpark. You belong here. I'm glad we signed it.
Do you have make sure that someone besides me